so much for coming for this public talk of the International School of the Golden Rosycross. You know, we normally, for those that are coming for the first time, we share to be international or a spiritual school. National is this, you know, we have a global team, and sometimes you have bad luck to have someone like me with a poor accent and that will commit thousands of grammar mistakes here. So please, you know, don't run away. And we hope to count on your kindness and support for that. And we normally say that if we are able to communicate with our hearts, language shouldn't matter that much, right? Spiritual school. What does spirit mean? Is it someone, some sort of entity, or some sort of external God? No. From the standpoint of the universal teaching, the spirit is the central idea that moves the universe. And it is omnipresent. So it is the center of an atom, the center of the innermost being of any person, the center of a galaxy or even the universe. So without the spirit being the center of matter, nothing could manifest itself. And truly, that's the only authority that anybody should follow. And especially now in these Aquarian times, following an external authority like a guru or a master should be something that belongs to the past. Because we should be able to find that source of authority in ourselves, discover it, unite our consciousness with it, and follow it. And that's why, in the school, nobody declares, himself or herself a master of this, X, Y, and Z, and that. We are pupils from the moment we join until the moment we die. Okay? Because the moment that we start to believe that we actually know something is the moment that we stop learning. And learning is the basic experience of the transformation of the human consciousness. So that's why also a school, and not a religion, not a sect, not a cult. Okay, we respect all of that, but we prefer to position ourselves as a school. Okay, and Golden Rosycross, why? Let's leave golden to the end. Let's talk about Rosycross first. It's very simple. The rose and the cross are in us. We are the cross. We are nature. Okay? We are the manifestation in space and time. And within us, there is a universal principle, the spirit, that the Rosicrucians of the past, symbolically speaking, called the rosebud. And if you take a rose, right? May I do this? If you take a rose and you look at this rose from this perspective, okay, you get the meaning, one of the meanings that the Rosicrucians tried to express. This is the perfect spiral of manifestation of life. And it is within us. So the purpose of our lives would be to allow this principle to blossom and to become the true source of our lives, to put it right in the middle of what we think, of what we want, what we feel, and what we do, okay? The four corners of the cross. And so that's why the true meaning of the Rosycross is to unite the reality that is in space and time with universal reality that lies within us. And why golden, right? Well, gold, according to the alchemical tradition, is the most noble of the materials. And it's not because we are going to become anything that is related to wealth or rich or anything, no, nothing. It's because all the elements of our lives, the lead of our destiny, the tin of our pride, the iron of our will, the copper of our feelings, the mercury of our understanding, and the silver, that is the mirror of our soul, should all be transmuted and united with this particle of gold that lies within us. And that's why the rose and the cross, after its blossoming in its full unification, should actually become one single reality. And this is the reason why the symbol of the golden Rosycross is a totally golden rose, a blossom rose, and a cross. Okay? So now that we more or less explained to you what is the school, etc., and eventually if we had to finish right now, you'd have the gist of it. Let's try to jump into the theme that brought us together this afternoon. Okay? The voice of the silence, I'm reading from the door, the voice of the silence, and the awakening of a new consciousness. Okay. Before we talk about this, this principle that is the voice of the silence, and the spirit spark is, according to the universal teaching, this voice of the silence that speaks in the innermost of our being, in our consciousness. And the manifestation of a new consciousness or a new awareness that should be the consequence of the unification of the human mind, the human heart, and the human life with this principle. Let's give you some context. Okay? That will be fast. It's not going to take more than 4 hours. No. Let's start giving you, a perspective of where we are. Okay. So sometimes, we are faced with those three fundamental questions of the Sphinx in the desert, right? Is that right? And that asks you, who are you? Where do you come from? Where do you go? Or what's your path, etc. Right? So we like to say that before I continue, the drawings are absolutely horrible. So it's not only the language, it's the drawings too. So maybe you were not that lucky. So the universal teaching says that spirit, the universal idea, and matter, the universal manifestation, the universal father-mother of the universe, they come together to manifest life in different phases and different stages. Okay? So the spirit plunges into matter, and matter rises into the spirit until they unite themselves. And this unification has one purpose: to create conscience and allow the conscious beings to become self-conscious or self-aware. So that when they are self-aware, they can choose the path that they want to follow. That is the very simple and deep thought behind all the legends that we see in the traditions of different people. Okay? So when we hear about the Garden of Eden, it's that. I mean, the effort of the universal intelligence to develop life out of the atom into a conscious being, until the point that when nature meets the spirit, you can have a self-aware being just like us humans. So the true question is, what do we do with our conscience? So the symbol or the legend says that we left that paradise in the moment that we have chosen between two trees. What does that mean? It means that you have two ways to flow with universal consciousness or with universal life. In harmony with it, in a co-movement, or in disharmony with it, in a counter movement. This small circle here has a true big importance. Why? Because it says that there is no automatic development in nature in the moment that you become self-aware, because from that moment on you are being guided not anymore by the law of nature, but by the law of love. And the law of universal love is choice. So the choice is given to every self-aware being to choose the path that they want to follow. In the moment we become self-aware, we normally also become enamored. Is that the right way to say it? Enamored? Thank you. Please correct me. Okay. Or should we? So, self-enamored of his own consciousness. And that's the moment that our identification with, I'm looking to that friend that corrected me many times of that, on the veils of our consciousness. I said it right this time. On the veils of our consciousness. So we identify ourselves with it, and we start to believe that we are our thoughts, our emotions, our reactions, but we are not. Those are energies that flow in and out of us. They are energy fluxes. They are not us. But since we are developing our consciousness in the moment that we become self-aware, we are just like babies. We think that, the cloth and the cradle that is around us is our being. And we say, this is us. Just like the small baby that is becoming self-aware. In this moment, so this is us here. We have a center of awareness, and we tend to become egocentric. And in the moment that we become egocentric, we are self-expelled of the paradise of Eden. Nothing happened to us. We just expelled ourselves from that co-movement with nature. When we speak about the spirit, it is also in that moment that the spirit spark becomes an individual spark. Until this moment, the universal intelligence that lies within an atom, is pushing nature forward. So from the mineral to the plants, to the animals, to the self-aware animals, we are having an effort for the spirit to become the center of a self-aware being. And in the moment that this happens, we have the union between the self-aware being of nature and the self-aware being of the spirit. And that's the moment where the human being starts to live in a dual world. Up to that moment, we are beings of nature. We are just a phenomenon of evolution. But from this moment on, we are united to the universal spark in us. It's not only that it's the center of the atoms that form our body, but we start to live in something that we could call a cell of the universe, a micro-universe, or a microcosm. And the microcosm that became, individualized with the spirit getting closer and closer and closer to matter, and the self-aware being, the human being, that is a development of evolution, they form one for some time. Because this being is eternal. And we are a phenomenon of time and space. And it is this very special moment that can lead either to the ascending arc of life that needs to be created by these two together, or it leads to another phenomenon that is known in many, many traditions with different names, but it means the same thing. So, for example, the Kali Yuga, or the wheel of samsara, or the wheel of reincarnation, or even the wheel of life and death. Why? Why does it have to be that way? Because in the moment that the self-aware individual and the individual spirit spark become one, time becomes life within a cycle here. You have life manifesting itself in a cycle within the microcosm. It's not a coincidence that this is also the symbol or the esoteric symbol of the planet Earth. Because in our planet today, in our tiny little grain of sand of the universe, okay, we are living in a closed loop. It's just like we became self-aware of this marvelous life and universal possibilities that we have, but we became attached to ourselves. We became absolutely egocentric. Okay? And this egocentricity creates this phenomenon of repetition. Let's try to draw this in a different way. Oops. Not only the drawings are horrible, but they are becoming invisible. Let me try something different. Okay. Can you see this? Yep.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes, yes.
This should be a circle. I'm so embarrassed. Okay. I'm going to try again, okay? More or less a circle. Okay. Let's divide this in 4. And let's assume that this is a year. Okay? With the 4 seasons of the year. So, in winter, nature sleeps. And you have seeds that sleep deeply in the womb of the earth, right? In spring, the sun rays are stronger and the seeds start to blossom. In summer, you have nature in its full potential, okay? And in fall, normally you have the harvest, and nature is preparing itself to another cycle, to sleep deeply, okay? We can look at this cycle here using the same model. In winter, the microcosm has an empty manifestation in itself. So, the 4 aspects of life, and we are going to explain this, are not manifesting themselves anymore. We call this death, or the end of life in the afterlife. Okay? So all this part here is the afterlife. And this is what we call life. Okay? So the microcosm cannot exist without a conscious manifestation in it and active and united with it. So it is normally attracted to life again. And here we see the microcosm with the first manifestation of a human being, that is the physical body. So in this spring here, we could say that is the equivalent of our birth. We grow into full manifestation. And why do we have 4 spaces here in this microcosm? Because we first receive our physical body, then when we are more or less around 7, okay, our energetic body or our etheric body becomes independent from our parents, and we start to function energetically with independence from them. Until that point, we lived under their energetic sphere of their etheric body. The third aspect that becomes independent is the astral body, or our desire body. That is the energy of our individual self, the energy that is used for us to manifest our desires, our feelings, okay? Our will also becomes independent. And then when we call ourselves adults, around 20 plus or less, that's when the four bodies are absolutely active. And then we are in full manifestation, but at the same time fully identified in most of the situations with our thoughts, our desires, our feelings, and our actions that are associated with these four bodies. And we live our lives, a very productive life, a very intense life, a very deep life. And we start to harvest all the experiences that we have with these four vehicles. Until the moment that we lose the first. The first one to be born is the first one to disappear, the physical. You see that we have inverted pictures here? Okay. Then what happens is that our consciousness starts to, if we were a four floors building, right? And we take the lift, okay? And our consciousness starts to move down, up, and it was absolutely concentric in the physical world. Then when we lose the physical vehicle, it moves to the etheric one. That's one of the main reasons of those near-death experiences, and people tell you about the reversed film that they saw of everything that happened to them. They see inverted from the end to the beginning. That's because the energy link that you have between your subtle bodies and your physical body is starting to stretch up to the moment that it breaks. Okay, that's the chi, for example. That's why people, they take their lives by breaking chi, hara chi. Okay. Then the consciousness moves to the astral body, and then you feel everything again that you've done, the consequences of your experiences and everything. Then only your thoughts and the vehicles of your thoughts are active up to the point that even that vehicle vanishes. And then everything that is left are the sum or the quintessence, because we are talking about four elements, isn't it? And then what's left is the essence of it, the quintessence, the fifth essence of the four elements that were lived. And they are all recorded in the magnetic sphere of the microcosm. And as modern human beings, we are specialists in magnetic recording of data. We should understand it very well. And then this is a cycle, and then the cycle begins again. 1, 100, 1,000, 1,000,000 times. Doesn't matter. Why? Because this ascending arc is not something that comes as a consequence of time passing by externally. It should be the consequence of an inner transformation. And what sort of inner transformation are we talking about now? You see, to have space for the other. It's a nice bite. Okay. We talked about the microcosm, right? So the microcosm is the spirit spark in its middle and the magnetic sphere of its manifestation around it. It's just like the super nice description of God done by Hermes Trismegistus. God is this boundless sphere which centers everywhere. So that's the microcosm as well. And then you have the sum of the experiences that were recorded into the microcosm, life after life after life. And we are going to represent those experiences by the 12 windows, the 12 doors, or the 12 magnetic poles of that window that we know as the 12 signs of the zodiac, for example, okay? Or the 12 hours of the day, or the 12 tones in music, okay? The 7 notes and the 5 semitones. So it's all recorded in here. And it's very heavy because it's one life after the other, until the point that you have almost like a thick layer of experiences. Like when you have, not like today, not like in LA eventually, you know, a big fog or, you know, clouds in the sky all the time, right? You're not very used to that, hopefully, right? You're very lucky. So in this microcosm, you start to have a lot of concentration of magnetic tension up to a point where this reaches a limit, like a saturation limit. And when that happens, you know, this whole system almost like collapses. Okay, and you have a magnetic storm in it. And this magnetic storm makes or causes the spirit spark to become active as a resonance effect or a resonance phenomenon with the center of the consciousness of the human being. And now the drawings become even worse, right? So that's a human being, well, at least an attempt of it. This is me, not you. This is horrible. It's really embarrassing. Okay. But anyhow, it's for a good cause. So the human being here, okay, that lives inside this microcosm, that has accumulated this ton of experiences, okay, becomes touched by this principle that starts to resonate with his or her own heart. Like a voice, like a calling. And that is the calling of the voice of the silence. This voice of the silence was called by many, many names. I have listed 7 here, okay? Just for the sake of enumerating. The Rosicrucians, as we said at the very beginning, called this spark or the center of rosebud. The Gospel calls it the mustard seed. If thy faith is even tiny as a mustard seed, you will be able to move mountains. That's it. It's not something else. It's this spirit spark. In the East, it was called the lotus flower. In India, it was called the Atman, or the ideation of the spirit. In ancient traditions, it was called the spirit. The spiritual school calls it the spirit spark. In some traditions, also call this as the voice of the silence. So in the moment that this voice of the silence, or the spirit spark, awakens, it is just like a new sun rising inside of us. And in that very moment, our heart, magnetically speaking, starts to function differently. We know, for example, that we have, the heart chakra is one of the most important ones in our body because it controls the main astral currents in and out, and it's represented by our arms here, right? And our capacity to act and interact with the world. But in this case, dear friends, what happens is a magnetic storm in our heart. If our heart were a compass, the needle of the compass will go crazy. Why? Because all the magnetic logic of the I, or of our egocentric life, that ruled our life based on our own identity and our own individual objectives and everything else, that needle will start to move in every single direction because there is a new magnetic pole being awakened in our heart. And it demands an answer. It demands a transformation. It doesn't suggest, it demands. That's why the human being, from that very moment on, and this happens during a human being's life, or in the previous life, when we open our eyes as babies with that calling in our hearts, and we don't even know why. And we may try to fit in, and we may have everything that any person would love to have, or no, or not. But it's really not an external problem. It is an inner calling that tells you that you must find the real purpose or the real objective of life. Because the external reality is just a scenario. It's just like a movie. And not to explicitly quote a movie, but it is as if you suddenly woke up of a true reality that was behind your eyes, right? So the moment that this happens, the human being becomes a seeker of the truth, a seeker of justice, a seeker of the true objective or the purpose of life or anything. And that person doesn't do that by choice. It's an urgent need. It's a yearning. A yearning is something that comes before your desires. It's not something that benefits you. It's just like the yearning to breathe fresh air. If your head is inside of a barrel filled with water. And this yearning starts to move that human being forward. So that he or she leads a life externally, but innerly it is a quest. It is a quest to find the fundamental answers for life. And for those human beings that have matured in the construction of their consciousness, that had so many experiences in their own lives and in the previous lives of the microcosm that they belong to. And that realized, finally, that the center of the universe is not their ego and its tiny little objectives. It is for that human being that the universal teaching, that is the sum of the wisdom of mankind, that doesn't belong to a group, doesn't belong to one school, and doesn't belong to one tradition only, but it's available for all human beings from all the ages. That universal teaching puts the human being in front of a threefold path. And I hope that I don't draw here, because then it's a disaster, right? Go out to here, okay? One more. Yeah. Play the sirens. Okay. So it is exactly this threefold path that is described in this book, The Voice of the Silence, that we used as the title of this presentation. I'm not sure if you had a chance to read this book. It's a very nice book. But even if you haven't read it, and you are connected with this voice of the silence in you, right? These ideas are represented as 3 fragments or 3 steps. In this book, they are represented as the voice of the silence itself. Okay? So, I'll write it this way. The second one is described as the 2 paths. 2 paths. And the third one as the 7 portals. Okay? Or the keys to the 7 portals. The Rosicrucians of the past, in times where you could not speak so clearly on such a nice afternoon in a public place without running the risk of having some sort of additional problems in your life, right? I'm referring to a couple of centuries ago. You had to use symbols to protect the teaching, to protect the people that were conveying the teaching, but at the same time conveying the message, the liberating message of the teaching. So the Rosicrucians of the past call these 3 aspects of 3 roses. The white rose, the red rose, and the golden rose. And in other traditions, okay, like alchemy, this is Negredo, Albedo, Rubedo. If you go to China or to Egypt, this is the caterpillar, this is the cocoon, this is the butterfly. And it's, if you go to the gospel, this is John the Baptist, this is Jesus, this is the Christ. Okay? It's all threefold everywhere. Okay? If you go to the Andes, okay, you see the 3 animals of the mysteries. So that tradition is, impervious, right? No, it's omnipresent and pervades everything and creates this sort of symbols that speak about the same tradition everywhere. So let's try to connect those 3 steps with what we just previously described to you. Okay. What is this first transformation? This first transformation is the liberation of the nucleus of our consciousness. It should be the consequence of this awakening. And when this awakening is strong enough in our lives, and then we take the decision of not walking with our backs to it anymore, but we take the decision of following the true objective of life, not our life, but life with a capital L, then the center of our awareness, or the center of our consciousness, can actually start to transform itself, its polarity. And from a counter movement with this nucleus, with the spirit spark, it starts to move in harmony with it. And then the center of our being, the compass of our hearts, instead of going through a continuous storm, because it's in opposition with the center, starts to get and to flow in harmony with it. And this allows for the transformation of the entire heritage that is accumulated in the microcosm. It is not as if we wanted to change reality by force or training our will, okay? Or training our will, or training our thoughts, or training ourselves in something. It is a process that starts to unfold from inside out and starts to transform the center of our old egocentricity into the center of awareness of a being that recognizes that the center of the universe already lies in him or in her. So that's the first transformation. That's why the Rosicrucians described this first transformation as the white rose. Because it's not only, purifying yourself from your own egocentricity, but at the same time, in the white color, you have all the colors. Okay? The second transformation is the transformation of the magnetic system of the microcosm. If we try, and I'm just representing the same sphere here, okay? If we try, and we use this example many times, and if we are repeating this to you, we apologize, but it's very eloquent. If we try to change our destiny through training, through practices, or through a stronger will, or stronger thought, or stronger feeling, anything like that.
Meditation. Meditation.
We can get to that. Meditation, to get to your point, is something that is very useful to take you to the very edge of your consciousness, because it brings you exactly to the middle of your brain waves. Okay? Don't ask me all the Greek letters, okay? But I know for sure that this is the theta wavelength, okay? And that's the contemplative mind that normally is the result of meditation. It takes you here, but what happens is that we normally tend to come back here. So this sort of transformation is a transformation that is not going to keep you in theta all the time, of course, but it will change the nature of your thoughts. And it will change the nature of your feelings, and it will create a big space to begin with, so that you don't need to push yourself to the limit, but instead, that still lake of contemplation with the waters, right, should be the result and the continuous state that the consciousness lives in.
Like a cork floating on the water.
Yeah. But without having to, without having to exercise to be there. It's the other way around. It's natural. It's the result of it, right? So this transformation here, okay, is truly the change of these doors and all the magnetic records that are kept and accumulated in the magnetic sphere of the microcosm. If we try to change all those aspects only with our ego, it's just like the iceberg. The conscious mind is here, the subconscious is here. I read a book recently that told me, I haven't read the reference behind that, but I'm just going to quote that this piece of our mind is able to process 40 bits of information per second. This piece is able to control or to process 40 minute bits per second. That's why all the methods and the techniques that are used based on this side hardly ever can change anything here. So we need a much faster processing capacity. And that's not outside of us. We don't need to train this. We just need to allow this piece of our consciousness that is like a lever to use the fulcrum. And the fulcrum is here. And the spirit is light. So it processes things at the speed of light. You see, it's different. And in the moment that this happens, okay, because we are based on a much higher and more effective source of intelligence and energy, all this reality starts to transform itself. And the Rosicrucians would call this the red rose, because then our life gradually starts to transform itself. And red to them was the symbol of blood. Not of bloodshed, of course, but blood as the essence of our lives. And then this idea starts to transform our manifestation gradually, okay? And that's why in the voice of the silence, this second step is called the two paths. You have the path of the eyes, that is the external path, and you have the inner path, the path of the heart. The path of the heart is to use the fulcrum to transform your consciousness into a lever that will gradually be able to allow space, not to transform itself, but to allow space for all these records or magnetic records to transform themselves. And then the third is a consequence of that. You see that we are gradually coming to the center, right? The nucleus got aware, then the sphere is transformed up to the point that the manifested life is touched and transformed by it. And here we are going to indicate only the, where's that? It's my pocket. It's normally closer than what you think. So that I'll make just as bad as the first one. And then it's the transformation of life itself that starts to function again in harmony with these principles. And the Rosicrucians call this third aspect golden or gold because of the transmutation of the elements. And you remember that I mentioned lead, tin, iron, copper, mercury, silver, and gold, right? 7. And the voice of the silence also called this as the 7 portals and the keys to the 7 portals. What portals? All the energy flows, or the energy centers that we have in us. Certainly you recall the chakras, right? I'll use the chakras, but they are just one aspect of it. Here you have a basic representation of the 7. And this indicates that this process of transformation and manifestation has reached its core. And it's not because you are sitting in one given position or projecting your mind somewhere, etc. But each one of these wheels of energy, not because you try to accelerate them, or you try to clean them, or you try to do anything with it, but as a consequence of the transformation of the whole magnetic system, they start to function in a different way. This is the last of the horrible drawings. Maybe your luck is starting to increase. But we thought that we should finish here saying that this transformation is the classic transformation of the universal teaching from all times. When you go to Egypt, for example, when you get into those magnificent temples that have 3 rooms, here, okay? All the other examples that I mentioned to you before, they all allude to the same process and the same path. And this is the path, the alchemical path, or the transfiguristic path, or the initiation path, it doesn't matter how you want to call it, that the spiritual schools of all times have made open and allowed for their pupils to follow. And this is also the working proposal of the spiritual school of the Global Rosycross. It would be quite honestly worthless and even not honest if we came before you this afternoon to talk about something that is just nice to know or that is interesting, if those teachings were actually not tools. So the school sees the universal teaching not as accumulated knowledge, but as tools. Tools that should be used for a true transformation of the human life. Because certainly we all yearn for a different and better world, right? But we are convinced that the change is not something that is going to come from the outside, but from the within. But a true inner change. Okay? So after having bored you with stuff, we are going to stop here now and open for questions. We have, several pupils of the school here as well, and we are more than glad to take your questions. And we hope that we can share some of the experience. So, please.
So why do it in the first place, right? Why the spirit matter line? Why is it so fascinating to the other? The spirit wants to define with matter, matter wants to define with spirit. Why not go on their own individual evolution of paths where spirit can take time to go slower? I mean, spirit can go faster and matter can take time to go slower. Why do they combine in the first place?
Fantastic. Great question. Hey guys, the fellow pupils here. Okay? What I'll do, I'll start addressing, and as you want to, you can jump in and add your own comments. Okay? From where you are, you want to come here, or whatever. This is a free forum. The question was, and I'll try to rephrase it to make sure that I understood. Okay? Why they didn't take spirit and matter their own independent path? Why combine? Okay? Because actually they're one. And in the ancient wisdom of India and of China, they have very strong symbols that talk about that unity. So the Chinese, they talk about the Tao, or in Japan it became the Dao or the Do. Okay, so everything that we hear about martial arts with the Do has that ancient root of a path. Okay, so Tao, that is omnipresent, non-manifested, and manifested. The deity, right? Is both spirit and matter. You saw this circle right here, right? What they explained, the Chinese and the Hindus of the past, is that this is just half of it. The true shape is this. And they say that you have the cosmic day, okay? The in Sanskrit, I think it's Manvantara. And this is the cosmic night, that is the pralaya. Okay? So, in the cosmic night, those principles, spirit and matter, they are absolutely integrated. Okay? In the moment that they need to manifest itself, why does God need to manifest itself? To know itself, to grow, to evolve, right? In that moment, okay, they must split the two creating powers of the universe, ideation and manifestation. Like this, for example, out of the unfathomable center, the two threefold logos or logoi, right? The Trinity that we know so well in Christianity, for example, and spirit and matter, when they manifest themselves out of this Tao, or this non-manifested deity, then they start to plunge one into another. Up to the point that they are totally concentric. And it's not a coincidence that some nations of the past still use this symbol because it's very powerful. And in the center of it, you have the manifestation of the consciousness. So this is where we are right now. And spirit and matter must come into a much, much closer cooperation, so that the other aspects of the possibility of manifestation of life can finally blossom. Excuse me. So, no problem. So, getting back to your question, why do they need to do that? Because in essence, they're life.
So when you say that matter was cast out as unity, so to speak, because it's now aware of the duality of it anymore, that's not necessarily the best way to express it. It wasn't cast out because it was aware of duality, it cast out because it was no longer aware of non-duality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very nice way to put it. Because where is duality? It's not outside of us. You know, we call day and night, but it's actually one single flow, right? So, in essence, duality is a projection of our state of being. And as you said, at the moment that our consciousness is not in connection with this universal unity anymore, it must follow the path of growing more and more aware until the point that this consciousness can create in itself again, by itself again, the universal unity. So you know, turning our backs and trying to integrate ourselves back into nature and our current state of life, you know, is just like the astronaut that with suit takes his breathing air everywhere, right? You know, the question is really not outside of us. The question is within us. That's why the transformation must come from within.
So you say once it gets to the golden rose,
yeah,
the chakras start to function in a different way. What way?
Ah, that's a great question. That's a great question. So I'll continue to look in this direction. If anybody wants to add anything, just raise that. Let's use a fan as an example. Okay, it's very simple. If we think of a chakra as a fan, okay, depending on the way that what's the name of that part of the fan?
Blade.
Blade. Thank you. If you have the blades of a fan in this way, right, and it turns this way, it's going to push the air in this direction. Okay. If I have it on this way, it will push inside.
Right.
What happens with our chakras today? Since we have an egocentric orientation, the blades of the fans of the chakras, and they have different number of blades, right? The root chakra has 4, and this one here has countless, right? So the more self-aware, the more activity, magnetic activity you have in the chakra. So the blades of the chakras are turned in a position to fill in the void space that is the sad emptiness of our egocentricity. We are trying to fill ourselves with everything that is from the outside, from matter to emotions, right? Isn't it true that we want all the love in the world, but we tend to ask more and give less, isn't it? So, when this transformation happens, and our energy centers start to function differently, especially this center here, okay, that creates astral and etheric energy. And esoterically, we talk about the liver and the spleen as two main doors here of the solar plexus, right? When our whole entire being starts to function differently, okay, the blades of the chakra, they start to turn. Because instead of living on a scarcity paradigm, you end up producing energy in abundance. And then you have more to offer. Up to the moment that you are brave enough to offer your whole life. And then in this moment, the blades normally, they turn inside. The chakras, they will turn in the same direction because our serpent fire system turn according to the magnetic poles of our consciousness here, not our body, but the consciousness. So it will turn this way or this way, it doesn't matter. But all the energy that is produced inside is offered to the outside. That is one way to see that fantastic parable of the multiplication of bread and fish. Bread means ether. Fish means astral energy. And in the moment that you are able to offer everything you have, it means, can you divide the spirit? The spirit is omnipresent. So the more you give spirit, the more you have. So in that moment, the magnetic functioning of our being is already totally different. I don't know if that happened.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay, good. Anything else? Anything?
Once upon getting to that point where your chakras start functioning in a different way, you start putting energy out. How does it affect your life from that point?
I'll try to give you an example from nature. A wave in the sea. Our egocentric existence based upon an egocentric consciousness. It's just like one wave in the sea. It is lonely. It is filled with fear, disappearing. It grabs every single moment of its life because it knows it's finite or finite. Right? It looks around and sees other waves competing with its space, and so on. The moment that the spirit becomes the center of the soul, and based on this new consciousness, this voice of the silence is able to transform our being. This wave continues to be a wave, but at the same time it recognizes, it realizes that it is the seed, the entire seed, manifesting itself in it. So in the moment that this consciousness is the seed, and it is a wave at the same time, it can interact with all the other waves, but without the fears and the contradictions and the anxieties and the concerns of a tiny single wave trying to establish its identity in the vast universe. It's there. That's why many symbols of this state of awareness have brought us almost to the edge, as your question about meditation, almost to the edge of realizing with our understanding what it is to be on the other side. So Lao Tzu, for example, said in the Tao Te Ching that to know the entire universe, I don't have to even get closer to the window of my bedroom. It's already in there. When they asked where this reality was, where the kingdom was, to the consciousness that we know as Jesus, right? Not the religious figure, but or the character, but that consciousness. He said, it is closer to you than your hands and your feet. And in the Apocalypse, John, okay, when it was faced with himself, but one step further into the multidimensional reality, right? It is said that he fell with his face because it was so overwhelming. And he said, who are you? And another, that it's himself, okay, but in another state of function, replied, I am the beginning and the end. I am the Alpha and the Omega. What does that mean? It means that it is the wave describing the sea to the wave consciousness, saying that there is no beginning, there is no end, because everything is. So, maybe. Okay. Any other question?
So, would the voice of silence just be a more flowery way of explaining enlightenment?
Well, actually, the voice of the silence, let's say, enlightenment, as you said, is one of these aspects. Okay. And it's this second. Why? Because enlightenment, light, it represents a new consciousness, a new understanding. And this new understanding comes from an awakening and should be followed by a transmutation or an alchemical transformation. So if we say that, and if we call all of this as the voice of the silence, okay, or the threefold path, correct? Enlightenment is this one. In alchemy, it represents albedo, light. Albedo means light in Latin, right? The first one is nigredo. Why? You awaken in your own inner darker world. Then it is transformed by this light that has awakened you. And the connection, the unification between the human consciousness and this light, okay, that enlightens it, actually transforms life. Okay.
So enlightenment is still a good measurement as to how you're progressing along that path. Listening to that voice.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Enlightenment would be a good example or measurement of how well you're progressing along your own path.
Yeah.
Unless you have attained enlightenment, you're not really working through chakras or anything else because they're still close and you're still drawing energy inward and you're not sending anything out. Enlightenment marks that point where you start realizing that you are the ocean and not the wave. But before then, you're just kind of kidding yourself because you're still just the wave, no matter what you think.
Yeah. And that's an important one because, you know, we are trying to split hairs here just didactically, right? Because this process is fun. And just like the petals of a rose are one. And, you cannot blossom one rose with one petal here and not the other. It's a holistic process, right? It takes everything at once. But the good the good point for us to realize enlightenment is in the moment that our ego is not in the center anymore. Because until the moment that we are trying to reach enlightenment to our ego or with our ego, we are still, as you so precisely described, as the wave of consciousness. That's why this step is at the same time so simple and at the same time so puzzling, because with our consciousness we move towards it. But since our consciousness forms the limit itself, we take a second step and we're still within the boundaries. That's why it is actually a self-revolution. That's why the Zen paradoxes try to put it in a very disconcerting way. So it's not a matter of a stronger wave. It is a matter of an integration with a reality that already lies within. Okay. So, if we don't have other questions, maybe we could finish because it's already 10 to 4, and our friends here that organize this sort of meetings of the school in this area in Los Angeles. They have some important information to share with you about the rhythm of these meetings and public talks and everything else. If you are interested, you do have one question.
Just one. I whittled it down.
No.
Once you get to the golden stage that you explained the chakra, you're doing that. Do you have to restart it?
Restart.
Like,
Does the cycle continue?
yeah, like, is it a constant thing? Is it a natural thing that you just, I go to sleep when I wake up and there it is again, naturally? Or,
Yeah, it's
because once you sleep, you tend to restart. You tend to stop all resistance.
it's again, this is not a process that we can train or perform with this.
Yeah.
So it's an entire transformation, a gradual transformation that takes place as a consequence of a change of a state of awareness. What happens is, in many aspects, we try to follow a path by achieving results with this operative mind here, okay? But in reality, the results should be a consequence of a true inner change. Because there is perfect unity, but if you try to change one external aspect without addressing the consciousness that has created that state of life in the first place, you are going to have, a change in the surface. Yeah. So you're going to get there and come back, just like a pendulum. Okay. So the true change, okay, must come from a self-revolution where a new state of consciousness and a new state of awareness can actually start to change your state of life.
And since you're saying it's not with the consciousness, the subconscious, the lower part, then you're not really aware of it.
No.
And it just happens and you're there and you're not like, oh, I'm in the ocean and I see that I'm in the ocean. I'm in the ocean.
Exactly, fantastic. So let's assume that this part here is like a lighthouse for a moment.
Yeah.
Okay? And this is the surface of the sea. And this is everything that is beneath the water. do you agree with me that without seeing what's here, to try to change anything is almost impossible? And the results may be almost out of luck or erratic, because some things may actually work, but some other things may not work. But what we are saying is that this principle here is just like fire. Fire that burns in the heart. In your mind, you have a mirror of understanding. It's your consciousness. That mirror, just like in the old traditions, with the old lighthouses, right? It was a silver mirror that would receive this light, create a focus, right? And with that focus, you can see what is behind your thoughts, what is behind your emotions, what is behind your desires. And when this is understood, that part that has been illuminated, okay, through this enlightened consciousness can actually be reintegrated and transformed. It's not by denial or forced change or anything. It's by pure inner comprehension. And with this pure inner comprehension, then those two aspects of the consciousness, right? One thought here, and the reason of the thinking here, okay? That were put apart, or were functioning in disharmony. They finally can be one. That's why this subconsciousness in alchemy was called nigredo, the dark world, the invisible world. And you must get in contact with it through a new consciousness, this mirror, an albedo, okay? The clear, enlightened world. And with the two, albedo and nigredo, you can create a third state, an integration, a transmutation that in alchemy is called rubedo. Rubedo stands for golden, stands for red, gold. Gold, because the Spirit has filled everything and transformed everything. And red, why? Because it's with your blood. It's not tainted with your blood, but it is transmuted blood. It is an entire integrated life that doesn't need to be concerned about controlling the change, but it is the change. Okay. Well, easier said than done.
Just gonna think about it for a while.
If I understand your question correctly, for me, the most straightforward language to cover that is an unfolding. The changes in consciousness don't come from doing, it's from the energy of that divine spark. From the inside out, then changes begin to occur to our consciousness and our actions and such. So it's not something that we can drive and control and shift gears and such. It's becoming quiet and listening to the guidance of that inner one.
Just real quick, is this resemble microcosm? It's our consciousness which is infinite.
Which please repeat your question, sir.
Unconsciousness. Is it similar to a microcosm inside us, which is infinite?
The microcosm, yes. You said microcosm, right? Actually, what we call subconscious.
Ele está perguntando se o subconsciente é como um microcosmo que é infinito.
Sim. Thank you. So if the subconscious is just like the microcosm that is endless, right? Yes, because if you think that we assign a level of depth here, but this is the contact with the whole intelligence and the whole experience of the universe. This is the wave. This is the sea. And what we normally call or tend to judge as things that we want to avoid, or things that we don't want to look at, etc., that are driving our behaviors, are actually pieces of our consciousness that we call subconscious, right? That are not integrated and not understood. And in the moment that this is transformed, the separation between good and bad, or evil and bad, etc. It's not that we are going to become evil, of course, right? But it starts to disappear. It starts to fade away, and the whole life, the infinite life of the microcosm, is integrated into the manifestation. That's the image of the sea and the image of the wave. I would suggest, if you allow me, that we hand over now to the local team to give you the information, and we are going to stay here, all the team, to try to address your questions that were not totally addressed, or some other questions that you might have. So, whomever is going to give the information, could you please come forward?
Thank you.